The Strait of Hormuz is open, or is it? Markets are euphoric, then slightly more cautious. The risks and realities, so far as we can see them, of the war with Iran. Matt Mahan, he's a Democrat and mayor of San Jose. He also is a rebel against Democratic virtue signaling and mismanagement. Is that a path to becoming California's next governor? Well, he joins us. William Henry Harrison was president of the United States for 1 month. 1 month. Hardly anyone pays attention to him. Perhaps we should. We'll tell you why. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. Going to start the whole show here tonight. President Trump is selling. The markets are buying. All the world needs is for reality to catch up with the marketing. Trump said many things today about the war with Iran. A deal was 1 or 2 days away. The Strait of Hormuz is wide open. Iran has agreed to almost everything, including, the president said, in a conversation with my colleague Weijia Jiang, a joint U.S.-Iranian effort to remove all highly enriched uranium from the country. This handing over of the keys to Iran's nuclear kingdom would come, Trump told Weijia, without the U.S. handing over even $1, not even, in Trump's words, 10 cents. About all of this from the president, Iran has said next to nothing. It did say, however, through state-run media, that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, that's the IRGC you hear so much about, would continue to supervise passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Might it exact tolls? Unclear. Is that perceived as menacing? Mostly yes, as vessels appear as hesitant today to transit the strait as they were yesterday. Also, this might be important, the U.S. blockade of any vessels linked to Iranian ports continues, which Iran said constituted a violation of these new current understandings. How big a violation? No one knows. And yet, markets exploded this morning with enthusiasm, though they trimmed their sails in some late session trading as, well, diplomatic scolds reminded the traders on Wall Street that much about all this remains unsettled and opaque. Oil traded down for most of the day. That was good news. West Texas Intermediate fell 10%. Brent crude fell 9%. Those futures, though, also crept up a little bit in the afternoon. In the main, though, markets bought in optimism. It's going to be up to the diplomats to deliver reality. Another round of U.S. talks with Iran could commence in a couple of days, according to our latest CBS News reporting. Trump said today he might even travel to Islamabad, Pakistan, to finalize a big deal. The key word in so many of today's headlines, might. This might happen. This might be happening. We have, by all accounts, entered into the TBD phase of this war. So many contours to be determined. We begin tonight with CBS News Pentagon reporter Eleanor Watson, who joins me here in the Conversation Corner. Eleanor, what did Iran say about all this today?
Well, Iran kind of responded to this flurry of posts by President Trump. He was posting to kind of manifest a deal that he wants, while Iran is continuing to try and set its own conditions. One of those posts, as you mentioned, was he said Iran proclaimed that the Strait of Hormuz is fully open. Iran said, not so fast. We say it's open, but if you go along our controlled route, saying Iran is still essentially in control. Another post President Trump made was that Iran has agreed to give up the nuclear dust, his term for the near bomb grade enriched uranium, about 900 pounds of it that is still deeply buried inside Iran.
And not dust.
And not dust. Iran said, again, we have not agreed to that. And in fact, an Iranian news agency just posted before this show began that Iran considers the enriched uranium, quote, as sacred to us as Iranian soil and will never be surrendered. So while President Trump is selling, as you said, his points, Iran is still declining those. So huge gaps remain ahead of this deadline on Tuesday of the ceasefire.
The Defense Intelligence Agency submitted to Congress some interesting information about missiles and one-way attack drones still in Iran's possession.
That's right. Yesterday, during a hearing on the House side, the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency that said in a written statement that Iran still retains thousands of missiles and one-way attack drones that could pose a threat to U.S. and allied interests. That goes kind of against the fact that the military objectives, as President Trump has said, have been achieved. The president earlier this week in an interview said that Iran has been destroyed militarily, that the only card it has is the Strait of Hormuz. But clearly that testimony submitted yesterday shows that Iran still has some cards to play to try and inflict as much damage as it can and endure a longer war if it needs to.
Eleanor Watson, great stuff. Thank you so very much. CBS News national security analyst Aaron McClain joins me as I walk over to the touchscreen. He's also the host of the Most Excellent School of War podcast. So how do we look at today? That traffic, as I said, kind of stalled. Is it open? Is it not? How should we evaluate this? How should we think about this?
Let's zoom in, Major, to the Strait of Hormuz here. Look, the bottom line is, as of this moment, and things can always change very quickly, the Strait of Hormuz is not open. You know how you can't declare bankruptcy by just shouting in a crowded room, "I declare bankruptcy"? You can't open the Strait of Hormuz for the same reasons. The Iranians are going to have to agree. The closest they came this morning to agreeing was to state, as you and Eleanor were just discussing, that you can move through the strait on their approved route. That's this northern route here up through Iranian territorial waters. Now, even if that were true, and by the way, there have been some conflicting statements even on that as the day went on, even if that were true, that's still pretty menacing in the way that, Major, if you were to walk out of your house into your street in front of your house one morning, and there were a bunch of mobsters standing there and said, sure, you can walk down the street, but you got to walk down right here. If you walk down over there, we can't say what's going to happen to you. Right. That's not acceptable on your street for law and order, and it's not acceptable in international waters.
And it's not acceptable for the owners of the vessels or those insurers backing up what the cargo is.
That's right. Even if these international lanes, which are these white control measures you see down here, down the middle of the strait, were reopened today, it would take some time to build confidence back. If you have Iran still essentially throwing its weight around and saying, no, our strait, our rules, that's going to take it substantially longer if it's ever going to happen at all.
And the U.S. blockade remains.
Absolutely. So Iran has its de facto blockade even as we speak here in the strait itself. Then if we zoom out, this is a bit of a wider look. We were just looking at this spot right here. That's the Strait of Hormuz. The United States Navy has drawn a line here, basically from the tip of Oman here up to the Pakistani-Iranian border. This is the blockade line. And Iran, which of course has ports all along the ocean, up the way its coast up here into the Persian Gulf, any ship entering or leaving an Iranian port, the United States Navy asserts it will intercept roughly in the vicinity of this line. It seems, based on Central Command statements, it's been pretty successful in getting ships to turn around as they come out. The question right now that I don't know the answer to, and I'm not sure anybody really does outside of CENTCOM, is what are they doing about ships going in? It's a little bit less clear and probably a little bit more challenging to catch them.
How do you evaluate what Eleanor and I were just talking about, this Defense Intelligence Agency declaration to Congress that Iran, I'm just going to quote it directly, retains thousands of missiles and one-way attack drones?
Well, they've got these deeply buried sites throughout the country where they've been storing this stuff. We have hammered them pretty hard, and they have a lot less than they did at the start of this war. Probably not enough to achieve much more beyond harassment throughout the region. But what does harassment look like? Harassment can look like blowing up a petrochemical plant. Harassment can look like hitting a ship in the Gulf. So even if Iran is militarily a lot less capable than it was recently, its ability to do these counter-economic targets remains. And that's why they do still have cards to play.
Aaron McClain, great stuff, as always. Thank you very, very much. On this program last night, Florida Republican Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna accused Arizona Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego of misconduct that was, quote, sexual in nature. Luna was on this program and clarified this social media post that was directed at Senate Majority Leader John Thune. She said it was a reference to Senator Gallego. She claims that these accusations that she made reference to on our program have been sent to the Senate Ethics Committee. In response, the spokesperson for Gallego said, and I quote, "These are right-wing conspiracy theories being parroted by a fringe far-right member of Congress. Senator Gallego has not received notification or been contacted by the Ethics Committee," unquote. Gallego, of course, close friends and political allies with former California Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell. who stepped down after a series of very serious sexual misconduct allegations. Now, before any accusations from Congresswoman Luna surfaced, Gallego met with reporters on Capitol Hill earlier this week, vehemently denying knowing anything about Swalwell's behavior and any misconduct on his part. I want to play part of what he told reporters.
How did you not know about the allegations? So considering you chaired his presidential campaign, wouldn't some of this have come up? Some of those allegations predated when he ran for office.
Again, this man led a double life. He lied to us. He lied to his family, lied to his constituents. Some of the most powerful people in this country, even before he ran, he was trusted with some positions that normally we would never think someone like this could do if they're leading that double life. And again, I was manipulated. I was lied to. And everyone else was too.
Has this forced you to reconsider rumors you may have heard about other people in Washington? And separately, has it forced you to reconsider any behavior that you might have engaged with that might have been deemed by you as social, but that could have been interpreted another way?
Yes to all of that. I definitely look at the world in a different way now. I certainly am going to make sure that I'm going to take personal steps and office steps to make sure that we don't even get close to a gray line, because first of all, that's not who I am. That's not my character. My family knows who I am. They know my values, and I'm not going to allow that to happen. And I do think that Washington, D.C. has to have a bigger conversation about how to continue to change the culture, because clearly we did not change it after Me Too.
Nicole Killian joins me from Capitol Hill with the latest. Nicole, what's going on today?
Well, in terms of, the situation that unfolded throughout this week in terms of various allegations, members of Congress stepping down, obviously Congress now out at this point. But as we have been reporting, obviously we saw the resignations of Congressman Eric Swalwell and Tony Gonzalez this week, prior to Congresswoman Luna launching those allegations against Senator Gallego. So this issue not necessarily going away anytime soon, especially next week, as there have been calls for the expulsion of at least 2 other members of Congress, most notably Florida Congresswoman Sheila Sherfilis McCormick, who faces sanctions from a House ethics panel next week. Now, happening here on Capitol Hill today, the one thing that was occurring, in addition to a few votes, was a hearing involving Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., of course. He has a marathon of hearings here on Capitol Hill. He did back-to-back hearings yesterday. He's doing more here on Capitol Hill next week. But in this particular hearing with the House Education and Workforce Committee, he was once again pressed on this issue of vaccines, but more notably, also pressed on the president's mental health and mental fitness, especially in light of a series of posts over the last couple of days. Everything from his post threatening to end civilization in Iran if the Strait of Hormuz was not open, to his most recent post appearing to be depicted as Jesus Christ. Take a listen to a very testy exchange during today's hearing.
Millions of Americans are now wondering if this president is delusional and thinks he is Jesus Christ. Mr. Secretary, should President Trump fail a mental fitness test or an evaluation about his mental stability or emotional stability, would you vote to invoke the 25th Amendment?
There hasn't been a president who's more
Mr. Secretary, my question is, would you vote to invoke the 25th Amendment? Mr. Secretary, reclaiming my time. It's my question, Mr. Secretary.
And the secretary later quipped that the California Congressman Mark Takano there, who questioned him, was simply trying to do this for a fundraising video. But look, the secretary was pressed on a number of other issues, from the president's budget to, as I mentioned, vaccines, also the issue of gun violence, the measles outbreak, among other things, all issues that are likely going to come up again as he continues these hearings here on Capitol Hill, Major.
Nicole Killian, thank you very, very much. From Homeland Security to the CDC, there has been a bit of a leadership shakeup within the Trump administration. Earlier today, I spoke with longtime political reporter and author Molly Ball about all and what it means. Amid everything else this week, and there's been some pretty significant personnel moves around the White House and the administration. Todd Lyons stepping down as the head of Immigration's Customs and Enforcement. My colleague Nicole Skanga reports the White House will nominate Cameron Hamilton, once acting director of FEMA to be the Senate-confirmed leader of FEMA, and the president announcing the new head of the CDC will be Erica Schwartz. Molly, do you detect a pattern here?
Yeah, I actually do think that there is a common thread in this game of sort of musical chairs that's happening in the administration. I think what you clearly see is that this White House has its eye on the midterms, and they are retrenching, pulling back, trying to appoint personnel who will in some way reassure Americans, reassure the electorate in some of the most sort of controversial flashpoints that this administration has been involved in. So certainly ICE is one of those. Now, Todd Lyons was quite well respected in that role, but of course, you have a new director of Homeland Security coming in and trying to send a message that things are going to be a little bit different where immigration enforcement is concerned. I think the same thing applies to FEMA, where the previous leadership of the Homeland Security Department, which also oversees FEMA, had sort of pulled this nomination of the same person in sort of a fit of pique because he had said something that contradicted the president, but he was viewed as a decent choice for the position, and so now they're putting him back up. Again, I think reflects the new leadership of the department and also the administration's desire to send a reassuring message. And certainly at the CDC, that is an agency that is hugely controversial over under Secretary RFK Jr., particularly over vaccine policy. And so the choice of Dr. Schwartz, who is quite well qualified, who is, a Navy admiral, who has been a deputy surgeon general, is not one of these, frankly, out of left field anti-vaxxers that he is nominated to a number of other positions. And so a number of people in the public health community see this as a reassuring signal.
And some in the president's own base do not regard Dr. Schwartz as a worthy nominee and are sort of pushing back on that, indicating the White House, at least with this very high visibility choice, is willing to pick a fight there, possibly a midterm strategy in itself.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you have to remember that while that sort of Maha contingent of vaccine skeptics to whom RFK Jr. has been a hero literally for decades. This has been sort of the cause of his lifetime. They are very outspoken, but they are a minority. Vaccines are hugely popular in this country, and messing with the childhood vaccine schedule and that kind of thing is one of the less popular things that this administration has been involved in. So yes, there may be a vocal segment of the president's base that will be angered by having a sort of normal public health official nominated to lead the CDC. But to your point, I think that must be a fight the administration is willing to have in order to show that it is tacking to the center on this kind of thing.
And on FEMA, if in fact Cameron Hamilton is nominated by the president, and Nicole Sganga says that's going to happen, he told Congress FEMA should not be disbanded, which was not administration policy. And now if he's confirmed by the Senate, it sounds like FEMA might actually stay around all through Trump 2.0.
Well, at the very least, there will be someone in charge of it while whatever is happening to it is happening to it. We haven't seen, despite the president and others saying that they have that as a goal, we haven't seen a very concrete effort get rolling to unwind FEMA in the same way as, say, the administration has really attempted to dismantle the Department of Education, for example. And we also see that, inconveniently for the administration, disasters continue to happen. Yep. And so you need a federal agency of some sort to coordinate those responses. The millions and millions of dollars that are deployed, as we all know, on very short notice to these emergency situations. You can't just not have anyone in charge of that. And so to be putting someone in this position is a sort of tacit admission that whatever they may envision for this agency long term, they just need this government to function.
Well, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Major.
Still to come, San Jose's Democratic mayor and California gubernatorial candidate Matt Mahan. Also, a new report reveals the FBI successfully obtained encrypted messages on Signal from a defendant's iPhone. That's pretty interesting stuff. Former FBI chief of intelligence Joshua School joins me to discuss what that might mean. Plus, an essay series we've highlighted here spotlights presidents and others for America's 250th anniversary. My conversation with the author of a piece about the 9th and shortest serving president in our history, the overlooked, but maybe not shouldn't be, William Henry Harrison. Takeout comes back in 90 seconds. Welcome back to Takeout. A week ago, Eric Swalwell was a leading contender to be governor of California. Then he suspended that campaign and then resigned from Congress. And that upended an already chaotic battle to be governor of California, the next one. Earlier today, I spoke with the candidate and current San Jose mayor, Matt Mahan. Here's part of that conversation. Here's all of that conversation, as a matter of fact, not part of it, all of it. Today is April 17th. Ordinarily, I wouldn't start an interview that way, but according to an article published in the New York Times earlier this month, your campaign has concocted, and I quote, a rather unusual campaign finance strategy. The pitch? Help us raise $35 million by April 17th, and you'll get your money back if we fall short. Well, today's the day. Did you fall short or not?
Well, Major, I think you're referring to outside efforts out there that I'm not involved in. But what's important in this race is that we talk about how we're going to make government work for the people of California. For too long, we've asked people to pay more in taxes without delivering meaningful progress on the things that matter, the quality of our schools, the affordability of housing, public safety issues. And I jumped into this race because as mayor of the third largest city in the state, I know what it takes to deliver real results in people's lives. So I'm not looking at the fundraising numbers. Nobody can keep up with the billionaire in the race that's already spent over $100 million, but we're making good progress on every front.
That billionaire you just referenced to is Tom Steyer. What's wrong with him as a candidate for governor of California?
Well, look, this is a guy who made his fortune in funding private prisons and ICE detention centers, oil, gas, and coal companies, and now is telling everybody he absolutely doesn't support any of those things and he'll take them all on. And I just, look, what we need right now is not someone with baggage and more of the same solutions beyond his history. It's a guy who thinks the answer is to make government bigger at a time when Sacramento has increased spending by 75% in just the last 6 years. I'm focused on outcomes. We don't need to make government bigger in California at this point. We need to make it better. I've helped make San Jose the safest big city in the country, reduced homelessness faster than any other city in the state, got thousands of new homes under construction without raising taxes. And so I think it's a moment that calls for accountability. We've got a lot of waste and inefficiency in government, a lack of focus, and we need a different kind of leader in government at this moment to really deliver for people, to show that California's values work in practice, not just rhetorical.
Tom Steyer has also pledged to prosecute ICE agents and prosecute leadership within the Department of Homeland Security, in addition to abolishing ICE. Do you support any of those ideas?
Look, he's promising to abolish ICE, which he can't do, implement single-payer health care, which he can't do. This is just damage control for the fact that he funded ICE detention centers not long ago. The guy made $90 million in private prisons. And so, look, we need real answers here. On immigration, both parties have failed us. And real answers are not these oversimplified things that you're hearing from Tom Steyer on the one end or the MAGA candidates on the other end. Democrats need to be able to acknowledge that we should have a secure border. And if you're committing serious violent crime in our country and you're not here legally, deportation is a very reasonable consequence. On the other hand, we've got millions of people in California who have been here for years, working, contributing, they're raising children who are U.S. citizens. We need a pathway to a legal status. I mean, we need a compromise that actually moves us forward and allows us to get back to focusing on what we do when we're at our best in government, which is expand opportunity by improving schools, investing in infrastructure, the things that really matter in people's lives, and the kinds of things I've delivered on as mayor of the third largest city in California.
Matt, there's an interesting conversation going on in California. About $180 billion by some estimates was either poorly managed and lost in California or flat out stolen. Let me repeat that number, $180 billion. A, do you think it's that large? B, do you think it was stolen or poorly managed? And C, if you're governor, what would that mean to you and what would you do about it?
Well, Major, I think it is true that we have a tremendous amount of waste, inefficiency, and even outright fraud in government spending. These systems have gotten so big and bloated.
In California, under Democratic management.
In California, but in other states as well, and in the federal government, our government, we have allowed it to get so big and bureaucratic and reflexively always come back to people and ask for more revenue rather than forcing ourselves to get better, that there's a tremendous amount of waste, certainly on the tens of billions, not maybe larger to your point. We know there was $32 billion in unemployment claims that were fraudulent, but Here's how I've led in San Jose, and let me even back up from that. I grew up in a working class family in a small farming town on the Central Coast called Watsonville. We were paycheck to paycheck. I grew up in a household where we watched every dollar carefully because it was a direct trade-off between food, paying the mortgage, putting gas in the car. Money was tight. And that's why in San Jose, I've held us accountable for delivering dramatically better outcomes on crime, homelessness, home building without raising taxes. We have balanced our budget, not raised taxes, and made huge strides in improving our city. That's the kind of leadership we need. It's called accountability, a focus on outcomes, not just process.
Last question. You've been quoted saying Democrats became consumed with virtue signaling and catering to highly organized interests and enamored of jargon and so-called systems thinking. What do you mean?
Well, what I mean is that we've got an establishment within the party that's very insular and it is not really as accountable as it needs to be for the basic things that government's here to do. At the end of the day, our job is to make people safer, build and maintain infrastructure they rely upon, provide high-quality public education, remove barriers to economic opportunity, including for small business owners, the basic things that really matter. And we've gotten off track with all of this virtue signaling, and it just, the best resistance, to use a word that we've been talking a lot about in California, the best resistance is delivering results, the real things that matter in people's lives. That's what I've been doing as a mayor, and that's what I want from our state government, which is why I'm running to be our next governor.
Matt Mahan, Democratic candidate for governor of California. Appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, Major.
Messages on the encrypted messaging service known as Signal, well, they might not be as secretive as many of the users assume. Next, how the FBI got its hands on messages from a defendant's iPhone. Pretty interesting. Next, here on The Takeout. Welcome back, man. We're doing almost the whole show here from the Conversation Corner. The Senate agreed to a temporary extension of FISA. FISA, what is that? Let me remind you, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. That extension runs until April 30th. FISA, this is important, allows the government to collect communications of non-American citizens outside of the U.S. without obtaining a warrant. It can also collect data from Americans who are in contact with foreigners. There's a divide among House Republicans, and that derailed a vote last night that would have extended these powers for 5 years. The FBI's former chief of intelligence, Joshua School, joins me now. He serves as the CEO of BowWave, which provides cybersecurity services to the U.S. government. Walk my audience through this FISA thing and what its history and success rate has been.
So I think it's an important distinction. First, FISA, the FBI has FISA inside the United States against national security targets. They have to go to court. They have to achieve a warrant because it's American citizens. What Congress is divided on is FISA 702.
Right, special section thereof.
That's right. That is a collection against non-U.S. citizens outside of the United States. A couple of distinctions there. There's a huge vetting process that goes through the FBI to determine if somebody is a U.S. person outside the United States. A lot of folks don't know, but even if you're a U.S. person, the intelligence community cannot collect on you just because you're outside of the United States. It still has to go through lawful intercept, which would be a FISA court, or even a Title III, which would go to a judge.
Got it.
So that's one. The success has been widely publicly attributed to many, many things, prevention of terrorist attacks, most notably the Taylor Swift concert, the solving of the Colonial Pipeline, other huge things that has been used globally. And so the success is there. I think the challenges that get people riled up is the protection of civil liberties. And as you said, foreigners talking to Americans and the incidental collection that goes through that. Now, the intelligence community and the FBI have a very strict protocol and has gotten stricter since 2023 on how they can unminimize that collection. Certainly as Americans, we wouldn't want Osama bin Laden talking to somebody inside the United States and not know who that is.
Right.
As an extreme example.
Right. Talk to me about this signal situation in the FBI.
So I think it's important that the communication was not intercepted off of signal.
Right.
It was retrieved from cell phone, being very technical. Law enforcement's job is to solve crimes and for the FBI to prevent bad things from happening. So they had authorization in the phone. The FBI employs really smart technical people that work with other really smart technical people, and they were able to retrieve this information, one half of the communication, as I understand it, from the iPhone where it was cataloged.
And for signal users, it's important to underscore that it wasn't intercepted, meaning it is encrypted and there is a certain reliability that comes with that. But if it's subject to an investigation and the proper authorization, and there's the phone, the FBI now knows it has found, at least in this one instance, a way to get in.
One instance publicly. And this is what comes out. This is what comes out, in court of law, and that's part of our democratic process. You have to reveal that. That's good and bad. You can use fig leaves to prevent that because of sensitive techniques, but it's rare.
Joshua School, great to have you here. Thanks
Thank
so much for coming in. Appreciate it. Next, former President Obama is pushing Virginians again to vote yes on the state's upcoming redistricting ballot measure. There's been interesting things about on what side he actually is, using some previous comments from President Obama. That's all part of the political conversation that our Hannah will weigh in on when we come back. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back. Took a walk back to the family table. Political panel time. Democratic National Committee Deputy Communications Director Hannah Moldavan, Republican strategist, former senior advisor to Mitt Romney, presidential campaign, Kevin Sheridan. Let's talk about everything that falls under the heading of the Iran war. Gas prices, inflation, whether things are moving as rapidly as the president says they are. Kevin, how do you evaluate it?
Well, look, he took a victory lap today, and obviously this is going to have to play out over months and years probably until we know actually what's going to happen here.
And some of the things he said have been agreed to have to actually happen.
But the markets loved it. Oil fell. Markets went way up. So the smart money seems to like this stage of it. Obviously, we need to get through, everything that's been announced and finalize some sort of a deal. And maybe we just leave, this regime in place in some more benevolent, less dangerous version of itself. And it's not threatening its neighbors and it's not arming, all of the proxies and, we contain it. That may be the best case we get out of this, but that's what Trump basically said today. We just have to see in the follow-up what actually happens.
We didn't have to go to war. Let's back up a little bit. This was completely a war of choice by Donald Trump, which caused chaos in the region, which didn't exist before, and also caused chaos at home where gas prices shot through the roof. Donald Trump said this week that the gas prices were fake inflation at the pump. That's crazy. Americans are feeling it here at home, and what do we get but injured service members, 13 who have lost their lives for this, And for what reason? I don't know anything what the strategic objectives are that Donald Trump set out to get beforehand. I will mention, too, that this was co-signed by Republicans this week in Congress when they didn't vote for the War Powers Act. So this is something Donald Trump owns, but also Republicans who are going to have to explain to their constituents who are complaining about the high price of gas why they co-signed this war.
Kevin, earlier this week with a different political panel, we talked about the aggregate amount of money that Senate Leadership Fund Republicans have on the House side, the Senate side, MAGA super PAC, lots of money. Depending on how you add it up,
it's a lot of money.
400 million, 500 million, 600 million. But interestingly, on an individual basis, I like to remind people that when you raise money as a candidate, that money goes farther than indirect money from a super PAC because you can get better rates for your advertising, et cetera, et cetera. James Tallarico, Democratic nominee for Senate, $27 million. John Ossoff, Senate, $14 million in Georgia. Former Governor Roy Cooper, $13.8 million in North Carolina. Sherrod Brown, $12.5 million in Ohio. All first quarter fundraising ticks for them, pretty high numbers. What does that tell you?
Well, it
if
tells
anything?
us. It makes
I know you're a partisan.
Makes you nervous as a Republican to see all these Senate seats, with this much money. Obviously, it's going to divert resources from other more traditional battleground states to the, if you have to play in Texas, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. And so
that the Republicans would rather spend elsewhere.
Right. I think there's a lot of oppo that will be dumped on Tallarico, though, and I don't think he survives, first taste.
Who do you think wins that Republican primary? Ken Paxton or John Cornyn?
I think probably Cornyn, but I think it's a coin flip. I don't know.
Hannah?
This is music to my ears. Let's keep talking about the problems that Republicans are having, especially with what's going on in Texas. And Major, you just talked about those numbers. We have really strong candidates for the Senate. So much so that people thought, Democrats might take back the House, but there's no chance they're taking back the Senate. And we have a real chance at that. And it's because we have great candidates raising a lot of money.
In Michigan, Senate Democratic primary poll recently came out. Abdul El Sayed, who's been on this program, 24%. Mallory McMorrow, 24%. Haley Stevens, 13%. That's progressives, two of them, near the top in the Michigan primary. Tom Steyer is currently leading in California after spending about $110 million. 3/4 of all campaign advertising in California spent by Tom Steyer. He's embracing suddenly progressivism. And is that a potential issue for Democrats? Progressives outperforming and perhaps exerting undue influence over 2028?
I don't see any problem for Democrats right now. We are winning by 90% and overperforming since Donald Trump was elected. And look, we're a big tent. The DNC, which is the organization I work for, is going to support any Democrat that the voters decide is going to be our nominee in that race. And so whoever comes out of the items you described, I think we're going to fight like hell to make sure that we beat Republicans.
45 seconds, Kevin.
Yeah, this is Mamdaniism, but
Mamdaniism.
Yeah, what's going to happen, though, is New York City is going to quickly see what that actually is like to live under. And I think, I think the result.
And it was also evident in the special election in New Jersey. A somewhat moderate, historically, congressional district sends a progressive Democrat to Congress. Same philosophy, or the same dynamic.
It's obviously a Senate in the Democratic Party to be as far left as you can get in that party, and that until that changes, that's going to be the case.
Do you think that becomes part of the conversation in the 2028 nominating process?
Well, that's for them to decide. But I think a very left-wing candidate is probably likely at this point.
Kevin Sheridan, Hannah Moldavan, thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Thanks for heading out here. An essay series is exploring each presidency ahead of America's 250th anniversary. The author who wrote about our shortest-serving president, William Henry Harrison, just doesn't get his due. Well, he gets it here. She joins me next on The Takeout. Welcome back. 1 month exactly. That is how long our shortest-serving president, William Henry Harrison, had in office. He died of pneumonia or maybe some other effects. It's not really clear on the historical record, but that illness followed an almost 2-hour-long inaugural speech and lots of parties and greeting people well wishing him his arrival to the presidency. And he did all that on Inauguration Day, despite blistering cold, and he refused to wear an overcoat, gloves, or a hat. Largely forgotten, Harrison's address focused on America's fight for democracy, as well as the importance of making sure power in the federal system was evenly distributed. That is the focus of a new essay that's part of the In Pursuit series that examines the first 250 years of American life. I spoke with the author, historian Sharon McMahon. Here's some of our conversation. William Henry Harrison gets the footnote treatment all the time. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but you argue, Sharon, we would be wise to spend a little bit more time, not only on the short presidency, it was just a month, but on the inaugural address of William Henry Harrison. Why?
Yeah, you're right. He's president for only a month, and so most Americans couldn't even pick him out of the lineup. But one of the things that I think is so interesting about him is the longest inaugural address in history that ends up getting cut down by Daniel Webster in advance. It was longer than he even delivered. Imagine standing out on the Capitol steps for all of those hours while he delivers a multi-hour inaugural address. But what he says is important. And one of the things that I think he reminds us of is the spirit of party, the excess factionalism that Americans are prone to. And this is something that George Washington warned us about. And this is something that he saw taking shape in America in new ways that he thought was potentially dangerous, was going to take power away from the people and put power in the hands of parties. And I think in many ways we're there in America.
And he also talked at great length in the inaugural address about the separation of powers and that those separated powers serve best, exist best when they stay within their own confined and determined territory.
Absolutely. That we built 3 branches of government for a reason. And it works best when Congress is actually doing their job. Listen, most Americans today don't have a very high opinion of Congress. And I know that's not a popular thing to say in Washington, D.C., but it's true. Congress has low approval ratings. And he felt like Congress needs to do its job so that the president can do his job. And so the judiciary can do their job.
He also warned, and I'm going to quote him here, about the old trick of those who would usurp the government of their country in the name of democracy. Meaning you can beguile the people saying you're a defender of democracy while taking power away from them and gathering it for yourself.
It's another way of saying, well, wolf in sheep's clothing, that you are using the language of democracy, you are co-opting the imagery and the language of what it means to be a democratic nation, and instead what you are doing is consolidating power for yourself and taking it away from the people. Because the more powerful leaders grow, generally speaking, the less powerful the people become. And he saw this as a trend on the horizon. He saw what was happening in the country, especially because of the incredible political and economic unrest that had been happening prior to his election. We think about, the Great Depression in the early part of the 20th century. This was the Great Depression of the era, in which we did not have safeguards like the Federal Reserve. We just had bank failures where people lost everything. We had no rental assistance to keep you from becoming homeless. The economic unrest was so significant. And he saw how during times of unrest, there is a propensity for leaders to try to mollify people's feelings and say things like, I'm a great president for democracy, but in reality, their goal was to consolidate power for themselves.
You can listen to our entire conversation on your favorite podcast platform, and you're going to want to do so. It's really good. Happy Friday, everyone. This is The Takeout, relentlessly curious, reliably civil, and occasionally clever. The Daily Report is coming your way next.